carbohydrates in starch-rich foods like bagels.
So this is the journey of the carbohydrate getting digested inside of Joel. So when Joel eats his sandwich, as there's carbs in the bread, it's going to enter through his mouth, the first stage of the digestive tract. And there it'll get broken down and this digestion process will start as it gets broken down mechanically by teeth, as well as by the tongue as it gets crushed against the roof of the mouth and gets broken into smaller pieces. Also, the salivary glands will produce what is called salivary amylase, and this enzyme breaks down chemically our carbohydrate into smaller forms like maltose, and eventually as it goes through it'll come into the form of glucose. So now our carbohydrate passes through the mouth down into the esophagus where it is squeezed through the peristalsis and moves through the cardiac sphincter into the stomach. So in the stomach, as well as being digested by the gastric acid, it also will get broken down by the rugae, which are muscles around the stomach that will churn and crush our carbohydrates into smaller pieces. Then, after it sits for a couple hours, for between 2 to 6 hours in the stomach, now it exits the stomach through the pyloric sphincter here and enters the duodenum, the first of the three parts of the small intestine. In the duodenum, a lot of chemical digestion will occur. Namely, when the pancreas, this organ here, will produce what's called pancreatic amylase. This is an enzyme that will digest the carbohydrates into maltose, a smaller form. From here, we also have the production from interstitial glands of other enzymes like maltase and lactase. The maltase breaks maltose down into glucose, the smallest form of a carbohydrate, this here. Lactase breaks down lactose, like in milk. Then it's going to go into all these small intestines here, the jejunum, as well as the ileum. In here we're going to have further chemical digestion as well as absorption is happening. Almost all absorption is going to be happening in the small intestines here. What happens is the glucose will enter the villi, which line the walls of the small intestines, and these villi, it'll enter the bloodstream through the capillary network here, as seen in pink. So the carbohydrate or the glucose will go into the villi and enter the bloodstream. What is left at the end of this process will enter the large intestine, and this is fecal matter. As the fecal matter goes into the large intestine and comes around, we will see about 95% of water being reclaimed back into the body, and a couple choice vitamins will get absorbed here. Then it will enter the rectum, which will wait for the fecal matter to be ready to exit through the anal sphincter, and then it'll exit out of the anus and hopefully into the toilet.
Protein in foods like ham.
Okay, so this is the journey of the protein into an amino acid. So here's our protein here. It starts in the mouth and once again undergoes mechanical digestion from teeth and tongue, breaks it and mashes it up before it goes through the esophagus, through peristalsis. Okay, so after it moves through the esophagus, it moves into the stomach. And in the stomach, we have pepsinogen, which is an inactive form of pepsin. And once activated, the pepsin breaks down proteins into peptides. Also in the stomach, we have hydrochloric acid, which also helps with digestion. And then after that, the acid chyme moves through the duodenum, which is part of the small intestine. And from there, we have pancreatic juices in the duodenum that help break it down. One of these is trypsinogen, which is an inactive form of trypsin. And when activated, that trypsin also breaks protein down into peptides. Here we go. And then in the small intestine, we also have villi, which take the amino acids that are created through peptidase, which are produced through interstitial glands, and peptidase breaks peptides into amino acids, which is the final form of proteins. And from there, the proteins enter the bloodstream through the capillary network in the villi, and after that, goes down into the large intestine. And what occurs there is you have, again, absorption of H2O, further vitamins, and excretion, where the protein goes out through the anal sphincter, and out.
Okay, this is fat.
You get lipids in coconut oil.
So for the journey of lipids, also known as fats, oils, and waxes, they start in the mouth. Now, fat is made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, with a very large ratio between the hydrogen and the oxygen molecules. So from here, it starts in the mouth, and it's going to get mechanically digested or broken down by teeth for mechanical digestion, and breaking down into smaller pieces. Then it's going to move down through the esophagus, through peristalsis, and into the stomach. It's going to get broken down by hydrochloric acid with a pH of around 2 to 2.5. Now this acid is going to break it into smaller pieces before it moves into the duodenum and the start of the small intestine. In the small intestine, our fat actually has a lot happening to it. This is the liver, and the liver produces bile. Bile is produced in the liver and stored in this little organ here, which is the gallbladder. Now this bile is going to be stored in the gallbladder. It's going to go through a duct into the duodenum. And in the duodenum, what this bile does is it's specifically built to break down fats. So this is going to break fats down into fat droplets. Now a bile is not an enzyme. What bile is, it's a emulsifier. And so basically it just kind of breaks it apart and shatters it into smaller droplets. Now these droplets are going to have a greater surface area, allowing the enzymes to work on it. The enzymes created in the pancreas will also go through into the duodenum, and this would be lipase. Lipase breaks down lipids and our fat droplets into fatty acids and glycerol. Now the fatty acids and glycerol are going to continue through into the rest of the small intestine, the jejunum and the ileum, and they're going to get absorbed into the body through our villi. And the villi, which line the small intestine, are going to be absorbing our fatty acids and glycerol through the lymph system. And so it's going to come into the lacteals, and then it's going to actually get reformatted into fat and sent through into the rest of the lymphatic system. Then it travels into the large intestine, where again, about 95% of that water is going to get reclaimed into the body, and it's going to form into feces. So the feces then moves into the rectum and is held there until ready for it to exit the anal sphincter and out.
Nucleic acids.
You get nucleic acids in foods like apples because it's in the DNA.
So we have now finally the nucleic acids journey through the digestive system. First we have mechanical digestion again in the mouth through teeth and the tongue, and it mashes up all the nucleic acids before it goes through the esophagus again through peristalsis, through the cardiac sphincter into the stomach, where we have mechanical digestion as well as chemical digestion through hydrochloric acids. And of course the mechanical digestion is done just how every other part was. And then we move into the duodenum, again into the small intestine, where we have pancreatic juices One being, here it is, nuclease, which converts nucleic acids into nucleotides. Additionally, in the small intestine, we have nucleotidase, which takes those nucleotides that were made from the nuclease and converts them into sugars, phosphorus, and nitrogen bases. Finally, again, the nucleic acid moves into the long intestine, although now it is in other forms such as sugar, phosphorus, etc. And at this point, again, H2O is absorbed, different types of vitamins are absorbed, and excretion occurs before it finally goes, once again, through the anal sphincter and out through the anus. And that is the end. Yeah.